Hey everyone, welcome to a new video here on Salt City Euros. I have a huge smile on my face because today should be a pretty special day. We, fingers crossed, are going to be starting the S50 swap touring for the first time in 8 months. It's been a really long time. Quick backstory, there's been an engine rebuild. I had a lot of trouble sourcing components, including a messed up engine wiring harness that I tried to replace. Things took a lot longer than I wanted to, but like I said, we have everything now. We have the new engine harness, so let's get right into it. Actually, before we get started with the wiring, for those of you that are new to the channel, first of all, welcome. Let me give you a quick rundown of what this vehicle is, what the backstory is. This is a 1989 BMW 3 Series. I actually imported this vehicle from Germany, and the reason why I did that is because this is the Touring, which is the wagon version of this particular vehicle. They never brought those to the United States, so if you want one of these, you have to import them like I did. Early on in the channel, we did an engine swap. My buddy Max and I, when we first started the channel, we did an S50 swap. This is the inline 6 3-liter S50 US version out of a 1995 BMW M3. So I know a lot of people have called me out on this before. S50, it's not the real S50, I agree. This is basically just a hopped up M50, so 3-liter, a couple fancy components, better flowing head, etc. But it still produces 240 horsepower, and it's a fairly okay motor for this chassis. It definitely ups the power. It almost doubled the power from what this car originally had. So that's the backstory of what this car is and this engine. And the trouble that I ran into, which I mentioned in the intro, is that the engine harness that I had on this car originally, I actually bought from somebody who had modified it. It was done in a really bad way. A lot of the connections were just kind of crimped together and they came apart over time as stuff was being moved around. On top of that, it was an automatic harness that was modified. Wires were cut, they were just exposed, they were corroding. It just wasn't done proper. So I ended up scrapping the engine harness and I had a hell of a time trying to find another one. I ordered 2 from different parts dismantlers. I never got them, had to go through the whole, refund process, etc. So I think it's almost been 4 months and it took that long to find an engine harness. And luckily, I found one here at the local junkyard out of a 1994 325i manual. So that means no automatic stuff has to be cut out, and it's just perfect because it's OBD1 with the 2 knock sensors, the single Vanos, and we're good to go. So now let's start talking about wiring, what you need to do in order to get this to work in this chassis with a 24 valve motor. And I have the new harness right over here. So here is the engine harness. I actually pre-did everything, but I'm gonna walk you guys through the process of what it takes in order to make this work in that particular chassis. First things first, you have a couple of options. The first option, which technically would be your easiest, most convenient, but also most expensive way, is to buy an engine harness adapter. Now this adapter comes with 2 connectors. You simply plug it into your harness and it converts the signal to your chassis and you're done. So you can go to vendors like Garagistic, for example. I'm gonna link them in the description. You can check those out. If that works for you, that's fantastic. The second option you have, which is the option that I chose, is to modify your engine harness and actually plug in or cut the wires and solder on the plug directly to your harness. The reason why I personally chose this is because this is less clutter on the harness. So you only have 1 connector versus having another one plugged in here and then another plug that then plugs into your chassis. I personally think that this is the cleanest way, and you learn a lot about wiring. Now it is very time consuming, it's very labor intensive, and you still run into the potential issue of introducing wiring issues into your harness. So let's talk a little bit more about the process. I'm not gonna go into extensive detail, but I wanna give you an overview of what it takes to do this. So first things first, identify your C101 plug on the chassis of your E30. This is what it looks like. This is the female side. So as you can tell, there are a bunch of connectors that need to be connected to the engine wiring harness. So I recommend that you peel back very carefully this rubber boot and expose the wire colors on the back here. So if you look closely, you will see that there are numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way around, there are about 20 potential connections on this plug. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna take a piece of paper or on your laptop, open up an Excel sheet, and you're gonna write down number 1, blue, because this wire right here is blue. Number 2 is empty, 3 is empty. Number 4, you're gonna have brown and violet. So you go all around, you do this for all 20, and then we're gonna look in our Bentley manual what the functions of these wires are. So after you've written down all your numbers and colors of your C101 connector on the chassis side, you're gonna have to do some research. Now, truth be told, I'm using a Bentley manual, and as far as I can tell, there's no actual plug description. They have the engine management diagrams. There's a lot of sources online. Let's actually go back to Garagistic. They have on their website a general plug description of what each function does. So I've done a comparison of the most common ones, and I've written out the function that matches my wire color and the number. So what I did here is I have this Excel sheet that has at the beginning the E30 plug. I don't know if you can see it on camera, but there is the plug number, the color, and then the function. Now this could very well actually it almost guaranteed will vary depending on what year, what motor. It could definitely differ. So don't take this as like the ultimate guide, but this is just to show you what I've been doing in order to figure out the wiring on my car. So once you have the functions and the colors, you're gonna have to match the wires and the colors from your engine harness. Now this is where the Bentley comes in. It's very helpful. You look up the diagram, and of course there are different publishers around the world depending on what market you're in. There's other publishers that do this, but you are basically going to look for the matching functions. So for example, alternator, that's a blue wire that is pretty much universal across all E30s, and the blue wire is going to have to get matched to the alternator signal of your engine harness. The same with the thick and the thin starter wires. They're pretty much universal across the board. So that's what I did here is I traced all the wires, and while you're looking through your engine wiring diagram, it is very helpful to mark, sorry, this harness is a mess to handle, but it's very helpful to mark each connector as you're coming across the function with a label. So this, for example, is my throttle position sensor, because it'll make it a lot easier once you're in the engine bay to match the harness with each sensor. So long story short, it's gonna require some digging, some research. Always use more than one source, because it doesn't necessarily mean that one source is correct for your year, early, late model, engine, etc. So always use multiple sources to find your source of truth. And then what you're gonna do is you're going to cut the wires off and solder on the male pin into your C101. And then that's pretty much it in terms of theory of the harness wiring adapter. Holy crap, it is hot here. I am sweating my butt off.
I am.
Whew. Yeah. So actually, like I said, I'm not gonna go into too much detail. If you guys do have questions, post them in the comments. But at this point, if you do have a automatic harness, it's pretty straightforward. You identify based on your engine wiring diagram your automatic wires. You simply cut those out, and that's it. In my case, one of the wires that I did have to cut out was the reverse light harness. That's not needed because that stuff is actually controlled in the E30 chassis, so by the shifter. So that was something that I backtraced and removed, but really having a manual E36 harness that's the way to go. I know a lot of people use E34 out of like the 5 series. Those have so much extra stuff that you have to remove. I'm personally not a huge fan, so if you do have the option, get an E36 harness out of a manual car. You're making yourself, less work, easier life, good to go. So, right, next step is installing your engine wiring harness. Now, I did already prepare this one because the E36 layout of the way things are located near the firewall is going to be a little bit different. There's like a large plastic engine cover or engine wiring harness beauty cover that you're going to have to remove. You're going to have to most likely remove your starter wiring and relocate it, but you should be able to figure it out. If not, like I said, if you have questions, post them in the comments and people or myself can try to help you out. So here we have our, wow, this is a mess. here we have our harness, and you are going to lay it very gently onto your engine. This is our injector and coil pack harness, so we're going to leave that somewhere here on the passenger side. Here we have the diagnostic port, as well as your chassis connector. So that stuff needs to be on the driver's side. So we're going to actually move things around just a hair. And wiring is pretty messy, so I apologize if this is not a very erotic process, but so this stuff is going to be on the driver's side, laid up here by your fuse box for the time being. Like I said, you might have to separate some of these wires. As you can see, I did that, and I held them together with zip ties. This is originally where, you know, something was holding these wires together, but I had to switch stuff around. This is your DME connector. This guy is going to go towards the passenger side and run through the firewall into the glove box. And then last but not least, you have the main portion of your wiring harness, which has your starter and alternator wiring, as well as all your various sensor plugs. All this stuff needs to sit nice and tidy down by the driver's side of the engine, just underneath the intake manifold. Oh, and then of course you have your diagnostic plug. That guy is going to be sitting up here as well. And if, like in my case, I'm going to be using a S14, so from the E30 M3 firewall beauty cover, all this stuff is going to be nicely tucked away. So let's get to connecting, and yeah, let's do it. All right, looks like all the connectors are plugged in as far as I can tell. Like I said, it makes a huge difference if you label them ahead of time. I actually forgot to label 3 of them, and I had to look in the Bentley to see where they go. But yeah, so it looks awful. Right now, there's wires absolutely everywhere. You're gonna have your fuel lines just in the middle of the whole thing. So if you really care, this is the time to clean up and make sure everything is routed correctly. For the sake of the video, I'm not going to spend too much time on this right now because I most likely will be taking stuff back off anyways, just to tidy it up and clean up. But I want to give you guys the whole view of what it looks like most likely. So don't feel bad about it. This is just what it is. This is wiring, and this is having stuff that is hidden underneath your intake manifold just be a mess. Like, that's just how it is. This is reality. There's a lot of people that are very, very good at cleaning up their engine bays and making this stuff work. But our number one priority, and your number one priority should be as well, to get the car running, get it started, and then later on, once it's functioning, you can take the time to potentially take your intake manifold back off, clean everything up, and make sure everything looks the part. My ground wire, my power wires that I need to attach, and then I'm going to be installing the intake manifold. Huge tip, first things first, if you have your fuel lines backwards, that's gonna be the number one no start cause. You'll see that all over the forums. I've actually had that happen to me on one of my first swaps, but make sure that you identify, just look underneath which wire or which fuel line comes from your fuel filter, and then route it appropriately to the front of the fuel rail. And then second, like myself right here, if you put stuff into your intake openings for your valves, make sure you take that out. You don't want that stuff stuck in there. So I'm about to put the intake manifold on, so I'm gonna be removing all my little dust blockers, which were just improvised little towels, and we are ready to install the intake manifold. So, truth be told, this is one of my least favorite parts right here. The relationship between the fuel lines, the fuel rail, the intake manifold, everything that's going on underneath the intake manifold. This is my least favorite part of the swap. But basically, what I recommend is that you connect your fuel lines before you bolt anything down, because these are very short and there's not a lot of room to work with. So you have the front one. Also, obviously, be very careful not to damage your injectors. I rebuilt mine, so at least they're not brittle, but you can still break them very easily. And then you're gonna wanna reach underneath. There it is, okay. Fuel line is connected to the fuel rail. Whew, I think I dislocated my shoulder. So make sure they're not like tucked way behind the fuel rail somewhere, because otherwise you're going to be in a lot of pain. If you guys have a better idea or a better process on how to install these, definitely let me know. I'm not an expert by any means. Like I don't know all this stuff. This is just what I've done in the past. Once your fuel lines are all the way tight and connected, you can actually start bolting down your manifold. And the reason why you want to bolt down your manifold before you bolt on your fuel rail is because some of these nuts that tighten down the intake manifold are actually hidden behind these lines, and they're just a pain in the butt to get to. Fuel rail is already bolted down and in the way. So let's bolt down the intake manifold, fuel rail, and then get the bottom supports attached, and we're almost there. Solid progress. So intake manifold, fuel rail, everything is attached. Just bolting down the fuel rail at this point, and then we are at a spot where we can connect the injector harness as well as the coil packs and then the intake elbow. We should be good for a first start. Oh, we need a battery. What are we going to do about the battery? Anyways, we'll figure that out here in a second. So let's get this thing on right here. Okay. That's that. And don't forget your little ground wire at the front here. This one always messes me up. You need to wire it underneath your little breather hose, and then it connects to this front bolt that is actually attached to your engine front hoist tie down point. I'm not sure what this is called, but yeah, this is where it goes right here. Make sure this does not get broken, because this can definitely cause your whole injector and coil pack mechanism to have some issues. All right, bad news. Battery's dead. I think we're gonna have to jump the car, because with 2 volts, we are going nowhere, boys. Let me plug in the DME, pull in the X5, jump it. We should be in business. Family car to the rescue. It's nice to have some cars that actually run. If it doesn't start the first time around, very, very common, very normal. I've had my fair share of hiccups and parts that did not work right the way I wanted them to. But, you know, it is what it is. So we are good to go. I'm gonna start the X5, and I think at that point, I got everything. So this garage is a mess, I hate it. All right, here we are.
What happened?
I don't know. It doesn't sound good, and B, it's not staying running. Oh, you know what? I think I know what it is.
What is it?
Well,
did you mix two?
No. I think, yep. Oh yeah. Idle control valve.
Oh.
Yep, idle control valve is not properly connected. All right, let's try that again with the idle control valve.
Copy that. Idle
control valve connected. Oh, I'm so nervous. Oh, buddy. Yep. All right, she runs. Obviously don't want to run it for too long. I don't have any of the coolant stuff connected, which again, not a smart idea, but she runs, she starts. It's really good news. Super excited right now. And I guess my next step is to wrap all this up. And as you saw, something as simple as the idle control valve, the little like accordion hose, or like that like C hose, that comes from the manifold goes down into the idle control valve. That was just slightly off and it wasn't connected. That caused a lot of problems. So I think we're good at this point. I'm gonna put all my coolant stuff in it, and then I'm gonna take you guys along for a first ride, see how the car is holding up after not running for, you know, close to a year. But dude, Tyson, we did it, brother. Yeah, buddy. So super excited. Thank you guys for watching. Really appreciate it. And yeah, we'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.
Saying bye to all the lies and all the times you cried, saying that I wasn't right, yet I was right by your side. You manipulator, playing games, your friends commentators, and I don't know what you say about our private conversations, but it's got them hating. Thanks to all the rumors you be claiming. It's cool, I'm done with you, so they can throw you a celebration. You gon' hate